Hey everybody, it's Angel from Halo Inspirations. We give you inspirations to help you spread beauty and joy through your quilting journey. Today is hump day. Whoop whoop, it's Wednesday. Yes, and today's video, completely excited about, is all about these flying geese. This is another block that you will find a ton of in many patterns. So today I'm just going to show you two methods on how you can get these done. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so for the first method that I'm going to show you, we're going to take a 3 by 5.5 inch ruler or rectangle, and we're going to take two 3-inch squares. Okay, basically what we're going to be doing here is just making one flying geese at a time. This is probably the most common way that you'll see this. But then you want to flip over to the up so that the wrong side is facing up towards you. The right side, or the pretty side, is facing down. You want to simply take your ruler and you want to draw a line from corner to corner. And remember, when you do this, you want to leave that space for your pen or your marker, and you want to use something that's going to go away. I just basically draw little lines in the corners just to make sure I'm meeting them, that I gave my ruler enough space. And then you just draw right down the middle. Okay. And you're going to do that on the other one. Whoop, look, it got a little crazy. Got to start that over here. Just leaving enough space so my pen, when I mark, actually marks on that corner. So I'm actually getting right down the middle. Okay. Now this is a disappearing ink. It will disappear quickly, so I have to sew quickly. However, you're going to take one of your squares that you drew, and you're basically going to line up on the rectangle nice and pretty. Okay, where you're going to sew is up on the outside corner, then it meets to the middle. Okay, and at this point I am going to sew from the middle point down. And when I do that, so I'm going to sew along here, along this line. Now when you do that, you want to be right next to the line. Whatever you do, you don't want to sew on the line. If you sew on the line, when you go to flip your triangle here, which we will do, it won't fold correctly and it'll be a little short. So by sewing right next to the line, okay, that'll make sure that the line is actually where the fold is. Okay, so let me get that done real quick. Okay, so I have sewn this line right next to the mark line. So the mark line is right along here, and I have sewn literally right next to it. It's kind of hard to see. It's already fading, but the sew line is towards this side, right next to it, absolutely right next to it. So when I go to fold this now, the line is over top of that thread, which is exactly what you want. Okay, now you want to make sure, I would not take an iron at this point. I know we like to iron our seams before we sew, but if you do that, you have a good chance of making some distortion. So I basically finger press at this point. It looks very nice. I'm very impressed. So now what you're going to do, you don't have to, you can use a rotary blade if you would like with your ruler, but I'm actually going to just trim off about a 1/4 inch with my scissors. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. Some people save these for other projects. For me, it depends on the size. But then you open it up. Oh, it feels so nice. Okay, and at this point we have half our goose. This is our goose, our geese, I don't know. So this is our geese, and this is, I call it the wind. Some people call it the background. Some people call it, I call it the wing. Did I say that? Yeah. I call it the wing. Your goose will be here. Okay, this is your main body. Some people call this the background fabric, and some people call it air. Okay, many different terminologies. I guess it depends on how it is that you see these flying geese. But the next thing you're going to want to do, again, right side up with that line drawn, and where you're going to place it on top of the other side, okay? And you're going to, again, sew right next to the line, okay, towards this side. And I actually, you could, well, I'm going to actually be on the left of it, because I'm going to start from the bottom this time, and I'm going to end up here at the top, okay? But that, again, by being on this side of the line, so it's hard to see, so I'm going to put the ruler down on top of that line for you, okay? And I'm going to sew right next to it. It's touching this line when I sew, and it'll be towards the corner. And I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to sew towards the middle. All right, so I'll pull you in so maybe you can see just a little bit better when I go to sew. This line is really faint and it's starting to fade fast on me. So I'm going to pull you in here quickly and we'll get this other side done. Okay, as you see, I am using a leader ender. Okay, just helps with the flow. Yes, I do still have my walking foot on. I'm working on another project. I didn't feel like changing feet. However, you don't need to do that with a walking foot. This can be done with your regular general presser foot or your 1/4 inch presser foot. Now, as you can see here, that's my line, and I'm aiming for right next to it. I'm grabbing this because I want this to stay as best as she can without getting my fingers knocked in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut. Normally I would go ahead and use another leader ender, but as you can see, I did pretty good because the line's right here, stitching's right next to it. I'm going to pull you back out and show you this next step. Okay, so I went ahead and cut off my leader ender. And at this point, you are going to want to go ahead and flip this up, okay? And when you do it, be very gentle when you finger press this, because again, your bias is working in there. But what I wanted to show you is if you flip this, okay, and it was shorter than the back, that would mean that you did not sew it correctly. It'll be too short. It won't come out to the size that you want, okay? So whenever you do this, you want to check how much you've got going on that other side, okay? Mine's pretty darn good. It'll lay good whenever it's pressed with an iron. But before I do that, again, I'm going to take my scissors. Like I said before, you could use a rotary blade and get that 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to eyeball it. Okay. Save those triangles possibly for another time. Now, one of the things that I want to mention, one of the most important parts to a flying geese or the flying geese block is this little portion right here. From that point to the edge should be a 1/4 inch. Okay, that's how you get your points when you sew this block. I'm going to flip her over and I'm going to try and pull this up And if you'll notice, right in here, okay, is where those threads meet. There is an X in there, okay? I'll do a picture and I'll put it up here so you can see that X. Whenever you go to attach this flying geese to another block, you'll want to sew along your 1/4 inch seam and be right above where those two seams meet, towards the top, right above it. And that way, when you sew it, you won't lose that point, okay? Now, whenever you go to trim, remember this should have finished at 5.5. But when you go to trim it, you want to line, now I'll need to press this first, but you'll want to line up, I don't know if I can do this math upside down, but you want to line up, yeah, I can't do it that way. I have to do it this way. Sorry, guys. There is a 45-degree line right here, okay? So I'm going to simply line it up along there, and mine does measure. I can see that I'm measuring from the point to the top is about a 1/4 inch, okay? And then if like I said, I really do need to press this before you cut, but you want to line up on that angle, get it nice and straight and pretty, and then this should be 5.5. When I go to trim this, I'm gonna line this up on the 1, and I'm gonna snip along here, okay? Now, to make sure that I actually got 3 inches high, this ruler is so backwards, but if I look, I have it on that angle, I am at 3 inches, okay? And I'm at 5.5 going this way. So we started with a 3-inch by 5.5 inch rectangle, 2 3-inch squares, and we ended still with a 3 by 5.5 inch rectangle with your flying geese in. So you're going to simply give this a press, and literally you just want to press it so we help that bias inside here not stretch, because these can go wonky real fast, okay? Now I'm going to get set up for the second method. The second method I just learned, I don't know, probably within the last, I'd say 6 months. I had no earthly idea, just like nobody ever taught me about this X when you sew, that you wanted to keep those points. You want to stay right above where the seams meet. This next method will in fact allow you to do 4 at a time. Now you could do multiples of these also. Yes, you're only making 1 at a time, but you can chain piece 1 square to every rectangle that you need. Flip, cut, finger press all of them. Then you go back and chain piece the other squares onto all the rectangles. So you could do 10 at a time this way, right? But you're just sending 1 through at a time, one side. This next method, we're actually making 4 at one time. And we're going to do it where we're still going to finish at 3 and 5.5 inch flying geese. Okay, so let me get this set up and I'll see y'all in a second. So for this next method here, I've got everything set up. What you're going to have to work with a little bit of math here. So this unfinished flying geese block was 3-inch by 5.5 inch. For this method, we have to utilize the finished size. So inside the quilt, this is going to be 2.5 by 5 inches. Okay, so that's what we have to start with for this method. So the first thing you're going to do, the length of this rectangle inside the quilt is 5 inches. You're going to add, and I'll put the math on the screen, you're going to add 1.25 inch to that. Okay, so that gives us 6.25. You want to cut 1 6.25 square, one large square. These ones were 3-inch squares, but finished it is 2.5 tall. This whole thing is 2.5 inches tall. So we want to take the 2.5 inches and we're going to add 7/8. Yep, we are. So what I've done here, and I'm going to pull in my ruler. It finishes in the quilt at 2.5 inches. So we're going to add 7/8. So each one of these hash marks is an eighth. So we're going to count to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what we've got, this mark right here, is 3 3/8. Now you could round and do that half square. You got to be careful with it, or you can go to the inch instead of using 7/8. You just got to be careful with it because you're going to have to line up your squares different. To me, while you're learning, it's best if you start 2.5, count 7, okay, and that'll give you 3 3/8. So I have cut 4 squares at 3 3/8. Okay. Okay, so the first thing after you get all your blocks cut is you're going to take your 3 3/8 if you're cutting the same size, but your squares, your smaller squares, and I kind of do a little cheat, and I've got a different pen here if I have to, but you see this dotted line? Where's my thing? You see this dotted line right here? That's my 1/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up those 1/4 inch hashes, that line, so that it meets corner to corner. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line. I don't think you're going to be able to see that. So I'm going to use a pen. You don't have to use a pen. Now you want to do this on the wrong side. Okay? You want to draw your lines on the wrong sides. So I got 1/4 inch. I'm going to flip it around. Again, I'm going to line up that 1/4 inch mark, corner to corner. Once I feel like it's nice and straight on those corner points, I'm going to draw another line. And you're going to do this with all 4. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and do the second one with you. And I'll do the last 2 off camera, because we'll need 2 of them for the next step. Just marked on my cutting mat. Yay! Okay, last one here. Line it up corner to corner, making sure it's on the point. Draw your second line. So those are giving you 1/4 inch sewing lines. Okay? The next thing you're going to want to do with 2 of them is you're actually going, the bottom piece is right side facing up. Okay? This is our wrong side, so we're going to put the right sides together, and you're just going to simply line these up. Okay? And yes, believe it or not, I am going to go ahead and pin these because I don't want them to shift. And it looks like I'm pinning pretty far, but remember I still have my walking foot on here, so I need some space. But I'm basically just pinning these on because I don't want them to shift. And then we're going to take this to the sewing machine. And basically what we're going to do is sew along each of these lines. Okay. There we go. Okay, so here we are at my sewing machine. Now remember, I usually sew with a scant, and I know this, so it's very important. So I'm actually going to sew, when I come down this side, I'm going to sew one needle width, so right next to the line, towards the center, okay? So I'm sewing this line, so I'm going to sew right next to it on this side, okay? Oh, here we go. Go ahead and drop that. Okay, go ahead and cut threads, spin it around. Now we're going to do the other side. Again, I'm going to sew just next to it on this side, okay? That's going to give me about that scant 1/4 inch, because a scant 1/4 inch is about a needle width. And you're just going to go all the way back down. Okay, once you get to the end, cut your threads and go back to your cutting table. So we've got these strange looking things. I know you're probably thinking, how in the world is this going to become a flying geese, right? All right, so I pulled the pins out. Now all I'm simply going to do, and you could use scissors at this point, that would be okay too. But I'm just going to line it up along that line there that I sewed or drew. Pick one, doesn't matter, just as long as it's about a 1/4 inch going both directions, because that way your seam doesn't pop. Then you're just going to simply cut them in half. And then you're going to take this to your pressing board, and you're actually going to press these up, okay? Now it's real important to notice that I have an overlap. Without that overlap, it will not be right. You want this to be overlapped in here, okay? Okay, so I'm going to take these and press these, and then I'll be right back. Now, this looks like a heart. It does not look like a flying geese, but trust me, we're getting there. The next thing you're going to want to do, so I'm glad we didn't mark all 4. I don't know where my head was, but at this point, you're going to line up this square. Remember, right side's facing up, right side's facing down if you have a right and wrong side, okay? Mine is just as solid. It doesn't really matter if it's up or down, but you want to make sure that these points down here are lined up and that it's straight. Okay. Just fiddling with it here for a second. Now, some people draw a line from this corner to this corner, and then they sew where this little notch is. That's how you know it's going to be right. So they sew from down, and then they do it again over here. However, you know me, I like to draw lines for myself, okay, that I'm going to utilize to sew, especially since I have my walking foot on and not my 1/4 inch. It's lining up really nice. So I've got my 1/4 inch from here to there, and it actually does line up on that little notch. So I'm just going to simply mark. Now remember, I wouldn't use pin. Flip over instead of my block. I'm just going to flip over my ruler, Ooh, and it's not lined up. Just came out just a little. There we go. Get that 1/4 inch right on each point up and down. And yep, it is marked beautifully in this notch. So I'm just going to draw a line here. It's kind of different from this angle. Okay. And I'm simply going to sew along these 2 lines. So I'm going to get that done, and I'll be right back. Lines are sewn. You're very simply going to take your ruler or just a pair of scissors, just so as long as it's about a 1/4 inch. Okay. Cut right down that middle. And look, guys. A beautiful flying geese. And you'll get, we got 2 of them out of that set, so you'll get with the other one. I still have to do this one. You'll get 4, and there's no waste, because you remember in the first method we actually had a little bit of waste with those small triangles. This time there is no waste. Now I would press again before I cut. However, I'm trying to get this lined up and it's not cooperating. Now we want this to be a 1/4 inch from that point, and mine is. Here's my 5.5 because we wanted it to be unfinished at 5.5. Okay. And then it's measuring at 3. So inside the quilt, yeah, it needs pressed. Inside the quilt, it will finish at 2.5 by 5.
Okay, so there you have it. 2 different methods on how to do your flying geese. I hope that you found this helpful. Just as a recap, the first one we did, we only made 1. Now you can chain piece them to get them done quicker, but you only made 1, and we had some waste. You remember we cut off the triangles after we sewed on the squares. So there is some waste with this one, but I gotta be honest with you, I feel like this is my favorite out of those 2 because there's so much more, I feel like, control in how to get this done. Flying geese start to introduce you into, making sure you have accurate sewing and a little bit more precise. It's just a little bit above your half square triangles, for instance. So, it's starting to bump up into your sewing and your technique. That's the word I'm looking for. So I feel like I have more control with this one, although with these we had no waste, right? And we got 4 out of the bunch. Okay, so if you really hate them and you don't like doing them, this might be your method. But I will tell you, I just don't feel like I have the same amount of control. It's just a preference of mine. I like to feel like I have that, and just to make sure that I do get her done correctly, okay? But it is another method, and I never heard about it until probably the last 6 months or so, and I've been working it out, and it still is not my favorite, but it is something that you can do to get things done quicker. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop them down below in the comments section. I promise to get back to you. Feel free to let me know what method you use, because there are other methods out there. And there's also some tools that you can have, some certain rulers that you can use. And so I'll save that for a future video. But just to let you know, there are many ways to get flying geese done. These are just 2 methods that I thought I would share with you. Also, if you have any questions, you can come and visit us today at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our Facebook page, where I will be there live, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The link is in the description box if it's here or there or however you're watching this. So FYI, love to see you there. Another thing I wanted to mention, I do have a newsletter out there, and we give a little bit of inspiration. Sometimes we give discount codes, or we let you know about sales that are going on our website. You might get some tips and tricks. So we'd love to have you join. The link for that is also down below. It's called Be Inspired. So come be inspired and join that Halo side of the family. At any rate, I will see you all next week. Until then, though, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And then until next week, may you continue to be inspired, productive, and ever so joyful, and never stop making your dreams in quilting come true. I love y'all. See y'all soon.